Good evening. Welcome to Beyond the Gatekeepers. I am Bishop-elect Vanessa M. Brown, and I'm your co-host and moderator for this evening. I'm happy to be here with you on tonight and very happy to talk about this subject matter. But before we get to it, we want to invite Facebook Live, which is Beyond the Gatekeepers page, as well as Bishop Yvette A. Flunder's page, as well as Instagram and Twitter, and of course, YouTube, to log in, to start sharing, to let folks know that we're on. Please like and share the Beyond the Gatekeepers page. We appreciate that very, very much. And of course, you know, we like to begin by shouting out where you are from. So please put it in the chat or in your comment section, wherever it might be. Let's just talk about where we're from tonight. I already see people putting it down. I appreciate that very much. Paris, California is in the house. Minister Sandy Hudson, a faithful person that watches all the time. Darnell Ishmael, God bless you. Daniel Ashango, God bless you. Flint, Michigan is here in the house. Come on, y'all. Tell us where you're from. Share. Connecticut is here. Dallas, Texas is here. Oklahoma City, yes, is in the house. Glad that you're here. Long Beach, California. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Dr. Rebecca Vocal, thank you for being here tonight. Richmond, Virginia, glad to see you. West Memphis, Arkansas is here. Charlotte, North Carolina is in the house. San Antonio, Texas is here. The people are coming out. We are glad to see you here with us. Renee Vickers, God bless you. Far Rock is here. Far Rockaway, New York. Baltimore, Maryland is in the house. Come on, y'all. Share for us. Greensboro, North Carolina. Louisville, Kentucky is here. So glad. Fort Worth, Texas is here. Greensboro, North Carolina, again, is here. So happy that you all are with us from around the country and around the world. We have a wonderful conversation for you tonight. We don't want to delay the time. We want to bring on our guests. Thank you. New Jersey is here. Of course, New York City is here. ATL, Bishop-elect Sonia Williams. I see you, Dr. Teresa Hord Owens. Chicago is in the house, Disciples of Christ, and they are here to support Dr. Crowder. Of course you are, Dr. Terry Hord Owens. God bless you. Durham, North Carolina is here. We are so happy. We are excited. We ask that you share so that other folks will know that that we are on tonight. Cincinnati is in the house. Thank you for repping Cincinnati. We are here tonight. Memphis, Tennessee, Seattle. Apostle Edward Donaldson is on with us. God bless you, Apostle. Pontiac, Michigan. Yes, I love it. Somebody said New York, New York. Of course, New York is here. We're so happy. We're so happy. Let us bring on our guests. Let us get to this conversation. We have a lot to talk about tonight. We're excited. Of course, Oakland, California is in the house. Our guest tonight is Dr. Stephanie Buchanan Crowder. She's a scholar, speaker, and author, but she's also the first African-American dean at Chicago Theological Seminary, as well as the first African-American woman who has received full specialship there at the school. And so, Dr. Crowder, please come and greet our audience tonight.
Well, greetings beyond the gatekeepers. So good to be here with you, Bishop-elect Vanessa M. Brown. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
My joy. I'm so glad to have you here. And of course, we're going to bring on the others. They are not guests. They are with us practically every week in the person of Bishop Carlton D. Pearson. He's an author, progressive spiritual teacher, and thought leader. Bishop Carlton D. Pearson, please greet our audience on tonight.
Well, the womanist spirit is in the house. And it's all over the land, and everybody seems to be getting it. It's like a global awakening, and nobody's surprised. It's a perfect timing for this anointing and appointing and this elevation and recognition to occur. And the people who are sensitive are submitting to it, because it does take some submission, because we're dealing with millennia of mistreatment, misguidance, misunderstanding, misinformation, disinformation, and confusion. So a lot of that's being cleared up, and tonight you're going to get more clarity than you've had in the past. So tell Mom and them to tune in, and let's enjoy ourselves. Can't wait to hear what I'm going to learn from Dr. Crowder tonight.
Thank you so much, Bishop. And finally, last but certainly not least, in the person of Bishop Yvette Adrian Flunder. She's our presiding prelate of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries and the senior pastor of City of Refuge United Church of Christ in Oakland, California. 30 years celebrating. Bishop Flunder, please greet our audience on tonight.
Well, of course, it's always my joy and privilege to be in the company of our friends and our supporters from all over the United States and world. And it's so wonderful to see and to experience Dr. Stephanie Buchanan Crowder. Amen. I'm just plumb tickled. I really am. And I know that she's going to be a blessing. I'm so happy to know that I call her Bishop Owens, my sister Ken. And from the DOC, the Disciples of Christ, that is also with us. And Bishop Pearson was back with us. I was out one week and he was out the week before, so we haven't seen each other in a minute. So we got some catching up to do. But he's been out there doing some dangerous stuff in the world, and getting himself more exiled. I just love it. It just really works for me. I am so thrilled to be free and to be able to talk with free people about what it means to be free. It is for freedom that Christ has made us free. We would do well not to ever be entangled again with the yoke of bondage. So I am so thrilled to be in company and in conversation and to talk about the womanist perspective on what is happening right now. Our mamas and the ways in which they put a womanist hand on every generation that precedes us. It wasn't the freedoms perhaps that we are experiencing or the freedoms that our children will experience even more. But they definitely did leave a wonderful roadmap. And we have somebody that really knows how to talk about that. We are happy to see you, Dr. Crowder. Welcome to the Gatekeepers.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Flunder. And I just want you to know you hit the saints upside the head today with be still and know that I am God. And so they are talking about it even here in the chat. And so we're excited about that. It's gone viral, I believe. And it just fabulous. We want to say thank you. Dr. Crowder, your book, and to the audience, if you don't know, the book is When Momma Speaks. When Momma Speaks, the Bible and Motherhood from a Womanist Perspective. And so it's a powerful reading. I had the opportunity to go through the book, and so I'm excited. You set the stage for us. And so I want you to give us a backdrop of the book if you can, but I want you to talk about being an African-American mother. I'm going to let Bishop Flunder chime in. I'm going to let Bishop Pearson chime in as he sees fit. And then you talk about womanist maternal thought, which is very powerful. And then you also talk about womanist biblical interpretation, and then we'll get down into the characters.
Thank you so much, Bishop. Well, let me just say again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be on this broadcast and to share with you. I'm very grateful. I was saying there are no 6 degrees of separation. And so, there are folk who know folk, and you end up in places. And so I don't take it lightly. I'm very grateful to be here, and what an honor to be in what I'm just basking in the bounty of bishops. And so just grateful to be here among all of you. Let me say that the book started this way. In 1998, I was living in Nashville. Husband and I had just moved to Nashville maybe 4 or 5 years prior, and it was 4th of July weekend, 1998. My sister and my niece and nephew were at our home in Nashville. We were going to do, just some grilling and just kind of hanging out. But I got a call, and it was a call from a hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. I grew up in Memphis. Memphis is home. But I've been living in Nashville for a few years, and got a call from the hospital in Memphis, said that my mother was in the hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, and that it didn't look good. The doctor told me that my mother was on a respirator, not able to breathe, and had explained to me that my mother had overdosed, attempted to overdose, and that they revived my mother 14 times. I said, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? He said, yeah, we revived your mother 14 times. And I said, why did you continue? He said, because she was so young. My mother was 44 years old. So immediately we put stuff in the bag, got on the road, was at 40 West in Memphis, got there, and sure enough, my mother was not breathing on her own, unconscious. They did brain scan, brain test. She had less than 1% of brain function. My sister and I decided that my mother did not want to live like this, would not want to be tied or wedded to any machine. And so within 3 days, we made the decision to pull my mother from the respirator. My mother died. Her funeral was July 13th, 1998. Cause of death, suicide by overdose. So why this book? And so if you notice in the front page, Bishop, it says, dedicated in memory to my mother, whose suicide still shapes me. So I want to talk about mothers, and I also want to talk about Black people die due to suicide. How do we talk about mental health and mental wellness? So out of that, my mother was 15 when she had me. My dad was 17. And so being shaped by that, but at the same time being nurtured by my grandmother, who knew that her 15-year-old daughter didn't know what to do with the baby. And so all of that has shaped and framed and formed me. Then when I got into the academy, at one of the first meetings I had in about 2004, I was sitting in a room with folk with PhDs, women from all across the U.S. in biblical studies and New Testament studies and Hebrew Bible. And it was amazing. As we introduced ourselves, we talked about how many children we had, how many grandchildren we had, right? And so it was just interesting. Here we were in the academy, isn't that sweet, talking about.
It really is. I just have to say, that's Mr. Pearson's mother.
That, right? You can't plan that, right?
You can't plan it like it was all cue.
So we were talking about our role as mothers, and how do we bring our role as mothers into the academy? Because many of us were bringing our children, to conferences. And, what are the ways in which we began to write about and think about who we are? Yes, as scholars, but as mothers. Yes, as authors, but as mama. Yes, as, person who writing journals and essays, but we are moms, and many people were grandmas and nanas. So that's how it all kind of started for me.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And we speak your mother's name right now in this presence, this right now in this space, and just so, so powerful, so powerful. Dr. Crowder, you talk about womanist maternal thought.
Yeah.
And I know this is about a womanist hermeneutic. Say more about that.
So let's begin with Womanist, right? So Alice Walker, she really introduces the word around 1976, 1977 in an essay in which she's talking about the relationship that a wife is having with her husband. The husband is interested in pornography. And so, Alice Walker will just hit you in the face with stuff immediately. So that's where really she first introduces the word, and how does this wife in this story identify as womanist. Later on, maybe about 3 or 4 years later, in her book, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, Alice Walker presents a quadrilateral definition, a 4-part definition to the word womanist. It's around the womanist being an individual, you acting girlish and grownish, and, granny would say, oh, you smelling yourself. So that's a part of the definition. Another part of the definition has to do with a woman who loves women sexually or non-sexually, a woman who loves men sexually or non-sexually, a woman who's committed to community. There's a part of the definition that, it's a woman who loves art and music and dance. A woman loves spirit with a capital S. And then there's a 4th part that has a political connotation, if you will, that womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender. So that's why you have, when you see womanist, and Bishop Pearson said earlier, it was a lot of womanists and said something about purple. So there's a purple that's a part of, and it comes out of Walker's definition, or her 4-part definition. So that's the womanist piece. That womanists were saying to feminists, how do we think about race? That as you're talking about voting rights, as you're talking about suffragists, how do you talk about race? And even womanists were critiquing feminists because feminists weren't really talking about class issues within the feminist movement. Because not every white woman was out on the front lines. Not every white woman could afford to be on the front lines. So womanist says, how do we think of this kind of triangulation of race, class, and gender? And how do we use that as a bowl, as a starting point to talk about, yes, biblical studies, to talk about theology, to talk about sociology, to talk about ethics. So you name it, how do we talk about these issues, these matters, through the framework of race, class, and gender? For me, I said, well, you know what? How do we talk about mama and ma dear and mama and nana and big mama? How do we talk about community mothers and church mothers and godmothers? How do we use this race, class, and gender framework to talk about who we are as mothers? And a part of it also, Bishop, has to do with whether we're biological or not. Because the way that I'm framing motherhood, it's not wedded to biology, right? But mothering as what we do to nurture, mothering what we do to support, to encourage, mothering as, it's that hand in your back that says it's going to be okay. It's that arm that's around your neck that says, baby, I got you. It's going to be all right. So mothering in a broader sense, and the place where people who don't identify as women can also enter into that space.
Bishop Flender, you want to drop in?
Oh, Lord. All of that. I think of it in so many ways, and as the role and how strongly it's needed right now, whether it is the womanist concepts that are embraced by people who are biologically or identify as women, and the womanist concepts that are being embraced in so many ways by our brothers and fathers and sons. It has everything to do with what it is that Dr. Crowder just lifted up. It has to do with the needs of the larger community, covering and protecting. It's this Dolores Williams concepts being very different than some of the predecessors that were talking, of course, about Black liberation. When we talk about womanist liberation, we're talking about the importance of there's an old King James word called succor. The whole idea of giving care and covering and protecting and providing, that whole reality. And the need is huge. And I think of it in some of the things that we talked about a little earlier, Bishop-elect Vanessa, when we were reading together an article that has to do with the fact that so many Black people in the war that has been curated for quite some time, the intentional war that is coming out of Russia, and I suspect will move into several different places, but that in many cases, the Black people that are in these European countries have been held back from getting on transport to leave, and basically told that until all of the white people have been facilitated, that they would not be able to get on transport and leave. I think about that, and the reason I connect these two things is because there's not a real care for the full body. Essentially, this whole idea of caring only for certain people, or the concept of the United States being the harbinger of democracy, which is what we've said all this time, that we take care of our people. Other countries don't take care of our people, or don't take care of their people. We take care of our people, which we know is a farce. Let's start with that. But the concept of the fact that we would now in any way, as people of faith even, get in bed with a despot means that the whole root of caregiving has been a farce all along. That's why this conversation about womanist ecclesiology and a womanist hand on this time, something that Bishop Pearson talks about a lot, is not just for religion. It is not just for the United States. It is something that the whole world needs to hear, because you hear a lot of people talking about how concerned they are about their people, but their people, whoever are their people, is often to the loss of all the other people, to the destruction of everybody who is not in their people. That was the difference in James Cone and Alice Walker. Not because I don't love and support everything that I heard from James Cone, but Alice Walker and Dolores Williams and Katie Cannon, and when they came and they started talking about it, it's what about the larger? We not only want to make our men great, we want to make our community great. We not only want to make the United States great, we want to make the world great. At least that's what we're supposed to want to do. We are supposed to want the entire planet and humankind everywhere to be blessed. I think that that's a womanist concept. It's the creating family and caring for the family, and not cherry picking, essentially who is worthy. And you make such a good point. I mean, I have been in families and around families, and I got my own family, because she doesn't know about Aunt Mary Jane, Bishop-elect Vanessa, about my Aunt Mary Jane, who used to live in the house behind my grandma and grandpa's house. And Aunt Mary Jane, something was kind of wrong with her, Dr. Crowder. And if you caught her on a bad day, and you opened the door from the little cabinet they made for her, she would grab you and beat you, just until you folks could get you pulled away from her. So when she was having a spell, as they called it, they used to give her some food and push it in the door real quick and close the door. And that had to be closed from the outside when she was having a spell. The important thing for me to say is that they provided for her. That is the many-breasted God. That is the heart that should be, and that is the heart that Dr. Crowder writes about, that we talk often with Bishop Pearson about, that he is a dyed-in-the-wool womanist. You want to know what he is? What the Holy Ghost is, old folks will say the Holy Ghost have birthed in him, is the wherewithal to embrace what it is to be a nurturer and to suffer if there is something to suffer for doing that. I think the whole church needs to have some breasts on it. That's what needs to happen. That is the shift and the change that needs to happen so that the world can see it. And let me say this, Bishop Lake Vanessa, if fundamentalist Christianity would get in bed with Putin, because they have, because in the ways in which it is supported by the previous occupant of the White House. If fundamentalist Christianity will get in bed with, that means that there is no great concern for humankind. Now, we knew that from slavery until now, but it is bearing its face now in ways that means we are going to have to pee-pee or get off the pot if we're going to do good religion in this country. We're going to have to name it and say this is not the heart of God. Let's name it and let's do it and cry loud when we're naming it, or our children will not want to have anything to do with anything that has to do with religion and faith. I believe in my heart that that is where we are and why we need a womanist response in this time. So thank you so much for your comments, Dr. Crowder.
If I can respond,
Yes.
I think it's important for us to think about, well, part of Walker's definition is that a womanist is committed to the survival of the whole community, right? So it's not just about me, mine, but it's us, it's we. So, a womanist critique says, well, okay, yes, we are concerned about what's happening in Ukraine. What are the ways in which we stand in solidarity? But a womanist critique will also say, well, wait a minute, how do we also push Ukraine to say, well, wait a minute, why are you treating our African brothers and sisters, our African siblings, the way that you're treating them? That's the whole race piece. How are you nurturing children and parents? That's kind of that womanist maternal piece as well. Or is there a hierarchy of who gets on the train? Apparently, yet there's a skin hierarchy, but is there also a class hierarchy of who's getting on the trains and who gets to exit? Walker was very clear that no, against, this whole feminist idea of, I am woman, hear me roar. Womanist says, well, you know what, we're going to bring everybody along. That everybody has to survive. Everybody has to be whole. That everybody has to be well. Everyone has to have access. That, all of my siblings, all of the people in my community, in our communities, have to have access and have to be given opportunities. That's a part of that whole womanist thinking as well. And we've seen that through history. I mean, you think about people like Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, when she's talking about the power of motherhood, well, she's saying we need powerful mothers because powerful mothers build powerful communities, powerful families. You think about people like Mary Church Terrell challenging, white women suffragists, saying, well, if Black women are given an opportunity to vote, that changes the landscape of the world. Ida B. Wells was known to be nursing and breastfeeding on trains, right? While she was traveling here and there, telling the horrible stories of lynching. So we have a history of what Dr. Joanne Marie Terrell likes to call proto-womanist or nascent womanist who've been doing this work and who in many ways sort of created a path for us. And so we have to ask, well, what are we doing now? So it's not like activism has not been a part of a womanist platform. No. If you're saying that you are a womanist and a womanist sojourner, then yeah, it's about solidarity. It's about, yes, praying with our feet, if you will, and making sure we protest with our prayers. We talk a lot about, the mothers of the movement. It's been, 10 years since Trayvon Martin was killed? Here's Sabrina Fulton, his mom, Lucia McBath, Jordan Davis's mother, Genevaville Reed, Cleo Pendleton, these mothers of the movement who had to, in many ways, mourn in public, but they turned that mourning into movement. They turned those tears into ways in which they would trek around the country and challenge and critique what was happening with the police, what was happening with stereotypes. A Black boy can't walk through a neighborhood, with a hoodie on. Sandra Bland can't drive her own car smoking a cigarette. So what are the ways in which, we have these traditions, even of women who were not mothers, right? Fannie Lou Hamer had a Mississippi appendectomy, if you will, but she took care of her nieces, right? And she was this kind of civil rights mother to so many. Ella Baker. Where would SNCC be had there not been an Ella Baker? Ella Baker didn't have biological children, but you better believe those people who and those children who came out of SNCC came through, if you will, the loins of Ella Baker. So we have these traditions and ways in which, Walker's idea of communal uplift and communal togetherness and wholeness have been carried out historically, and we see the fruit today.
Thank you for their response so much. And listen, I want to say to the audience, if you have a question, you have to put the word question in front. But the other thing about your question is that it really does need to be related to this conversation. I need to say that because it can go off into someplace else, and that's not what we want to do because we have you here today. But Dr. Crowder, you say something about womanist biblical interpretation, and then you give us a list of characters. And I want to know why you chose those characters, but I want you to say more about womanist biblical interpretation. But I want to know, she talks about you all, when you get the book, it's just a powerful reading. Hagar, a homeless mother. Rizpah, a childless mother. Bathsheba, a fearless mother. Mary, a favorless mother. The Canaanite woman, a relentless mother. And Zebedee's wife, a shameless mother. And so if you would, Dr. Crowder, let's hear a little bit more about biblical interpretation, a womanist biblical interpretation, and then these list of characters.
So don't let the idea of womanist biblical interpretation, it shouldn't scare us. We are, first of all, let's start with interpretation, ways in which we're getting to meaning. We do it all the time. When we're reading the newspaper, we're interpreting. When we're looking at people, we're interpreting body language. We're trying to figure out, when we go to places, we're trying to figure out, what's the lay of the land. We're interpreting, we're surmising. We are thinking through and processing, if you will, discerning if this is good or how this has relevance and meaning and practice. So that's what we're doing with interpretation. We do it every day. And so in the academy, in these hallowed halls of the academy, if you will, colleges and universities, seminaries, and divinity school, we tackle that then to biblical studies, biblical interpretation. Well, we're looking at this book called the Bible, which for Christians is a sacred text, which for other religious traditions, it's nice reading, perhaps. But for those of us here, it's sacred text. It's the word of God. God said, I believe it, that settles it. Amen. And so, but what are the ways then, if we take these stories that were not really, written during our time, New Testament stories, 2,000 years old, double that with Old Testament or Hebrew Bible stories, not our context. So how do we begin to look at these texts and say, well, how do I get meaning from these texts? How can I talk about Rizpah in 2 Samuel? Here is the story of Rizpah, a concubine, what I call a second wife, who has to give her sons, in addition to sons of Saul, as a way of making something right. She didn't have anything to do with that. But there was famine in the land, and the Gibeonites were like, well, somebody's going to have to pay, blood for blood. And so it comes back. David says, well, here are some sons, and takes two of Rizpah's sons. And so for almost 3 months, here is Rizpah, a mother. What does she do? For 3 months, she's outside covering dead bodies, mourning in public, covering dead bodies because of something somebody else did. We've seen that. We've seen the tears from Sabrina Fulton, Lucia Macbeth. We've seen the tears from Michael Brown. We know what that looks like, to mourn in public. So we began to think, what are the ways in which the biblical text, biblical interpretation, has relevance, credence, application here and now? Womanist then says, well, what are the ways in which we address race, class, and gender? What do we know about the whole issue of race with the Gibeonites? and David and Rizpah. How does class come into effect? So if David is king and Rizpah is the concubine, did she really have much to say about what happened to these boys? Right? Gender says, okay, patriarchal society, what did she have to say as a woman to this man who's in charge, to David? So that's what we talk about when we say womanist biblical interpretation, that we're looking at the Bible and saying, well, what meaning does it have for me as a Black person, as a Black woman, in my case? You know, how does it address class? How does it address race and class and gender? But the maternal piece is, what does it say to me as a mother? But I'm also reading into it and saying, well, how do I as a mother come to the text? As a mother of a high school student and a college student, you know, as godmother, what is the who-ness? What's my experience? What's my existential reality that's informing the interpretation, the meaning that I'm gaining from the text? We do interpretation all the time. I grew up in Sunday school, National Baptist USA Incorporated, Sunday school, 9:15 a.m. every Sunday morning. Vacation Bible School, 2 weeks in June every year. We were doing interpretation, right? We weren't calling it that. We studying the Word of God. It's Sunday school. So it's, you know, what are the ways in which we can take these sort of fancy 4 or 5 syllabic words and say, well, you know what, we've been doing it all the time. But here's a way just to make it $1 million word and call it interpretation. But it's stuff that we've been doing all along for those of us who've grown up, you know, in this religious institution, who've grown up in the church.
Bishop Pearson, you've been sitting there so wonderfully and listening and taking it all in. But I do have a question. When you hear about womanist perspectives and womanist hermeneutics and womanist biblical interpretation, how do you feel about that? What comes to your mind when you're hearing these things?
Well, I'm trying to differentiate or distinguish the term woman and mother, because the first woman that a man ever loves is his mother. Takes his first meal from her breast, spends the first 9 months of his existence in her body. And the most popular prayer in the Christian world is this: Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now at the hour of our death. Didn't say now the hour of our birth, the hour of our death. Holy Mary, Mother of God. Those are very powerful, mothering but womanist words next to the Lord's Prayer. That's the most popular prayer on the planet. That's the opening of many Catholic prayers. That's the largest expression of Christianity on the planet. And yet the woman has never been, except at least in language, in the place of authority, reverence, sacredness. I mean, the first words that usually are formed on a man's or woman or man's mouth, mom, 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 mom. It's very natural. But to say woman, which is man with the womb man, you'd have to also say wounded man or hurting man. Even the word Mary from Miriam, from the word Mara, which means bitterness. And the virgin's name shall be called Mary, which is I don't know why the scripture has it that way, because God supposedly told them to name her Mary, which means bitterness or pain. We have to deal with any bitterness. And why would there? We opened the story, Dr. Crowder did, with a tragic story that we rarely ever hear. You don't hear of mothers committing suicide or overdosing, particularly in the Black community. Our mothers are known to be strong and to make people die, don't kill themselves, you know. They're tough in every area of our experience. We call on our mothers, we lean on our mothers, we look to our mothers. So in reality, it's not father knows best, it's mother knows best. But the show that I remember is Father Knows Best. It's always Mama knows best or knows better. And my dad would say, your mama say you could have that boy? Your mama say you could have it? Put it back. Never, and I'm gonna tell your mama on you, or I'm gonna tell your daddy on you. I'm gonna tell your daddy on you when you're in trouble. But when you did something wrong, tell your mama, ask your mama. Daddy can I have an apple? Ask your mama. Daddy, can I go outdoors? Ask your mama. So the mama's been there, even in daddy's mind. But the language, and I hope Dr. Crowder, you can, any one of you, but particularly Dr. Crowder, can distinguish between the mothering ideology and the womanist, and then the feminist. Is there a difference between the three?
Sure.
And if there is, what's the most important?
Sure. Well, let me go back then to Walker. Thank you so much, Bishop Pearson. Let's go back to Walker. So, Walker in her, 4-part definition of womanist, she says, well, okay, it really became a way for Black women to name themselves, number one, but in her definition, she says it's a Black feminist, it's a feminist of color. This is Alice Walker, part of her definition. But then she goes on. So she says, so there's some space for correlation, perhaps collaboration, realizing that, yes, there are some Black women who do not pitch their tent in the womanist camp. There are some Black women who say, well, I'm a Black feminist, saying that, because you have people like Patricia Hill Collins, the Smith twins, who said they are feminists because they want to work within feminism to push the race and the class envelopes. Walker says that a womanist, a Black feminist, but yet she goes on later to differentiate. She uses this kind of color or chromatic distinguishing by saying that womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender, different shades, different way of moving, different kind of, chromatic kind of flavor, if you will. So that's one way we differentiate womanist versus feminist. Here's the other piece, as far as to your point about, well, what about mothers? Well, not all mothers are womanist. Not all mothers are feminist. Not all womanists are mothers, right? Yeah. Not all feminists are mothers. So, and Walker would then say, but how do we honor people where they are and give people the opportunity, the space to then decide, well, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to name myself, right? And realizing we have to be careful with binaries anyway, right? Because everybody will say it's this or that. Well, you have then people saying, well, what about points of intersectionality? How do we say, well, there are parts of feminism that I get, and there are pieces of womanism that I get? I have a colleague of mine, Dr. Monica Coleman, who wrote some years ago, an essay, Must I Be a Womanist? Because she was challenging and pushing the womanist envelope in many regards as it relates to LGBTQIA plus issues and lifestyles and matter and acceptance. She was pushing womanism as it relates to interreligious engagement, because so much of the language was Christian-based. So she's saying, well, how do we think about women from other religious traditions who, yes, have race, class, and gender at the heart of what they do? So I think we have to be careful, with the labels. Yeah, we have the labels, absolutely. But yet being careful that, if we're within them, how do we also critique them? Because if we love something, we care about it, we also dare to critique it because we want it to be better and to live better and to have more fruit in the world.
George Floyd's comment that touched the planet, not just Black people, is when he called for his mother. And again, Dr. Brown and Bishop have heard me say this. When he said that, I burst into tears. I mean, live. I said he called his mother because he felt her and sensed her. And I think he might have even saw her. And she came, and in 15 minutes, he was gone. And when he said mother, it seems to me every mother that has ever lived, that was a womb man, that had a womb, heard. Even childless mothers heard that, because all women have the potential. And I think that is what stirred the country. A grown man, who was a parent himself, now at the hour of our death, he could have very easily said, Holy Mary, Mother of God. But he was calling his own mother, but the whole world heard that. I think that was the beginning of a global enunciation of the role of the woman who birthed into the planet the existence of human beings. And I think that was like a consecration to an elevation of women in control. Now that's the famous prayer of the Catholic Church, but it's the Holy Father supposedly that runs it. And it's all the fathers. You have sisters. You don't even call the priest mothers. You call them sisters. I mean, the nuns, you call them sisters. Here again, the language. We can't dare call them mother, but we call the one mother of Jesus, Mother of God. So we're confused. The patriarchal mind is confused because the men will die for their mothers quicker than they will for their father. So you're bringing out something that is really quickening our consciousness and making us rethink what we believe and why we believe it. And how those beliefs add to or subtract from the quality of our lives. This may be one of the most pivotal conscious elevations that we've had in the history of the human race, at least in modern times.
Right. I mean, so George Floyd sort of returns to that from which he came, right?
Yes.
You know, I know we say ash to ash and dust to dust, but it's mother to mother, from mother back to, from mother back to mother.
Yeah.
You know, and you're right. That's what, I mean, so we stopped in our tracks, 9 minutes, at least that what we had, but longer than that, where in the Greek, it's gunai. That's, it's this kind of where we think of, gynecology, this kind of woman. Yeah, that's the word.
Or motherhood.
Yeah, right. And so whenever Jesus would use that word gunai, or a woman, if you will, it was always a pivotal point of something that was about to happen. And so you have it at the wedding of Cana. Mary is there, right? You talk about Mary, grown Mary is there, orchestrating what happens at this wedding. And Jesus is like, gunai. And Mary's like, I know you're not ready, but you're going to do this.
Oh, yeah.
Because people need, that's when Mama speaks, right?
Yeah.
Because this needs to happen. And I know you're saying not now, but she says, son, right now. Now is, the time. You keep moving on in John, the whole issue of the woman at the well, gunai. That is a watershed moment in that conversation with that woman at the well. Yep. So when scripturally speaking, whenever we hear that gunai, that woman, that's a pivotal point either around sociological kinds of connections and responsibility, or soteriological, or salvation, because that woman at the well, it changes the scope. And she goes back and, doesn't have to worry about going to the well when no one is there anymore, because Jesus has done something for her. And it's at that pivotal point just by calling her and referencing her as gunai, as woman.
Good point. Brilliant point.
It's very good. Before I go to Bishop Flunder, I want to say, Dr. Crowder, that you also you talk about mental health, right? And mental wellness. And I want you to say more about that.
So, the book for me was in memory of and homage, to my own mother, Joanne Gavand, who was 15 when she had me, just a sophomore in high school, being fast, her and my dad, who was 17. And there I come, after doing whatever they're doing. And, but yet, she struggled with drugs. And so crack cocaine was helping her to wrestle with so much of what she couldn't fix herself. And so she felt if she couldn't fix it, perhaps this pipe could fix it. And so it was for me an opportunity for us to talk about, as Bishop Flunder said, the aunt or the people that we don't want to talk about in our families, that we know, well, something's amiss, but what do we do? But we care for them, right? because all the while my mom still lived in my grandmother's house. You know, my grandmother still provided food and shelter, you know, while my mother is wrestling with, you know, her own issues and matters. And so I think, you know, Womanist says, okay, Womanist loves self, right? Womanist loves community. Womanist is about wholeness. So how do I talk about, you know, not just, you know, having a house, but how do I talk about mental health? You know, it's one thing to talk about, oh, you know, loving the Lord and, you know, going to church. But, you know, if people are at church and the prayers, you know, they need a little more than the prayers, right? And so not only do we need the pastor, but we need the psychologist and the psychiatrist. Not only do we need, you know, the ministers, but we need mental health therapists. And, you know, not only do we need prayers, we may need some pills to help balance whatever's going or whatever's not happening in our bodies. So to me, the book became an opportunity for us, particularly as Black African-American folk, to be open and honest and to have these difficult conversations about mental health and mental awareness, but also a conversation, you know, in my own Christian upbringing that, you know, sometimes we need more than what the church mother laying on hands can offer. Not knocking that at all, but it's both and, you know, it's health and wellness, it's faith and health. I think God works through medicine, and God can give us a miracle as well through the medicine. So that's what that becomes for me, Bishop Brown, that just way in which we've got to expand the conversations, that how does our theology and our sociology come together and walk hand in hand? How does medicine and our mind and spirit, you know, talk to each other and learn to live together and work together for the sake of not just our individual wholeness, but our collective well-being?
Beautiful.
Thank you, Dr. Crowder, for that. I'm going to defer to Bishop Flunder right now. But if you have questions, you're going to write the word question. Dr. Crowder is giving away a book. If you want the book, you have to put hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. That's hashtag, all one word, Beyond the Gatekeepers. And you'll be in the drawing tonight for the free book giveaway. If you have questions, you're putting question in front so that we can get to your question on tonight. Bishop Flunder.
Oh, this is just so rich, I have to tell you, you know, and of course it's kind of moving through me like fresh water, you know. So thank you all so much. I was thinking for a minute, because I come from a lineage of powerful women, many of which both Bishop-elect Vanessa and Bishop Carlton Pearson knew and know the women. And even my daughter sort of falls into that category. She's very much like her grandmother, trust me, as much as they say I am like my grandmother. But what I reflect on when I think about it is what I call the wisdom that reads the current reality. And I say it that way because there were things, my grandmother was one of those missionaries in the Church of God in Christ who went before the preacher to an area, a place in rural Texas. Seguin, Texas was a good example of that. And she did what they call worked out a church, which meant she called people in for prayer. And then when it got to in prayer and seeking to be saved and seeking to find a relationship with Christ. And when she got 15 or 20 of them, then they had to call a man to pastor the church. And then my grandmother went to the next location where it was a dearth of Church of God in Christ churches. And this was her role. She was an evangelist missionary who went and birthed out, she said, dug out. She used to use the farm, the agricultural term, dug out a church. And then it would happen again, and she did it again. But she never was able to be served by the churches, held up by the churches, because the church itself taught that was something that a woman was not called to do. Called to dig it out, but not called essentially to stay and remain and become that church's pastor. My grandmother knew that. She did what she thought was the top shelf of what she was capable of during her time. When my mother came along, my mother had a totally different kind of way to be than my grandmother. because my mother, particularly my stepfather, which was the long marriage that she had, my mother, for those 45 years or so, was a co-pastor in many ways to my stepfather and had that kind of influence. They knew she was a preacher. They knew she was a teacher. She benefited. Let's put it that way. She couldn't call herself a pastor, but she benefited. So she's a step up from grandma, if you understand. Some doors open for her. She hit that ceiling hard. I want y'all to know that. That glass ceiling that was created for her, Ruth hit that ceiling hard. Okay? She was the progeny of Kojic bishops and the progeny of evangelists and all. She hit that ceiling hard. She wasn't able to take it out, but she put a big crack in it. I have to tell you that. She definitely did do that. She did what she could. I am their offspring, and I can do what my matriarchs could not do. But I have to be honest about that. I don't see myself as stronger or smarter or deeper. My time reads differently than theirs did. And had I believed what I believed and talked like I talk and do what I do, and as the old saints used to say, I declare for God, somebody would have took me out by now. I can imagine. It wasn't enough of a crack in the ceiling for my grandmother to be my mother. Wasn't enough crack in the ceiling for my mother to be me. Wasn't enough crack in the ceiling, perhaps, for me to do some of the things I also envisioned to do, but that my daughter and daughters in the spirit will do. So I see the truths having also connected to them, but the progression, the freedom that came with what they left, the blood that they left in the ground for us, essentially gave us opportunities and gives us opportunities to do some things that they cannot do. Not only are we the hope and the dream of the slave, I hear Maya, but we are the hope and the dream of the mamas. I just love watching Mother Pearson walk behind Bishop Pearson, and she knows he on the line. You know what I'm saying? But that's his mama. I know her enough to know that if she's gonna walk across the floor, she's just gonna walk across whatever Carlton is doing. That's what she's gonna do, because she's earned it, if you understand what I'm saying. And so my heart would say to all of those who are hearing us that are under the influence of everything, honor, don't ever diminish what they could not do. Don't make small of what they could not do. They had to be smart enough sometime to do what they needed to do through their husbands or through their sons, in some ways to keep their husbands and sons from being killed and destroyed. That is literally the truth. To keep their families together, they had to make wise decisions, not fair decisions, not equal decisions, but wise decisions. I watched my mother chafe under that. And I want to just say publicly, my mama could preach circles around my daddy. So somebody gonna get mad at me, but it's just the truth. That girl was a preaching prayer warrior of a woman, but she had to be mindful even of how she allowed people to say that, because it could create all kinds of issues. She was loved because she submitted. Let's put it that way. In ways that she would not have been loved and appreciated and allowed to do what she felt called to do. Now, I'm her daughter. And I'll leave you with this. I go to a church and the people, they didn't tell me I couldn't sit in the pulpit. And so they walked me up there and the folks sat me down. And some other folks came and whispered and wrote some notes and said that, she needs to not sit in the pulpit. She needs to sit on the floor. Because and when I stood up, my whole congregation stood up that came to the service with me. And I walked out, and so did everybody else. We emptied the service almost, because it was a lot of us there with no conversation, no question, because I am in a generation where you ought to know better than to do that. in my thinking. You ought to know, you knew who I was. So you should know better than to do that. And I could not, for the sake of the many women preachers that I lead, deal with that without dealing with it openly. I think that's very important for me to say. But it is because of Grandma, and it is because of Mama, it is because of Mother Pearson. It is because of them that we have the right to even push back that Dr. Crowder is who she is at CTS. It is because of what they did. They had the same fire, the same burning, but their opportunity was very different. And it cost them a great deal to have that burning and not be able to really fully embrace what they knew they were. And I honor them as they sleep in the presence of God. I am who I am because that blood is running strong in my veins today.
Thank you, Bishop Flunder, for that. Dr. Stephanie, want to say there are several questions, and I know that you can't answer them all on tonight, but I do want to draw out just a couple of them if we can. One of them is, what in Bishop Flunder, Bishop Pearson, you all can feel free to chime in as well. What do you think of the what do you think of the notion that Black ballroom house mothers fall into the realm of mothers as you've described it? Black ballroom house mothers.
Oh, so, when I was making notes, I immediately thought of what's the show? With Pose. And I that's in my notes. I've heard RuPaul speak, and often what does RuPaul say? Come to Mama Ru. So absolutely. Now, I don't address it in my book because I say, you know what? It's not me. It's not my place to speak for somebody else. So I think it would be great to do a volume, around LGBTQIA plus, how go around notions of motherhood. Absolutely. But I think, the idea of, and what I said earlier, they got a little bit biology, but how do you put that hand in the back and say, I got you? How do you put that arm around the neck and say, woo, I'm with you? Here's a place to lay your head. We've seen that with Pose, and it's long before Pose. And so absolutely that it's not about, there's mothers can be mothers biologically, but there's a kind of spiritual and communal aspect that's to it. I was in Memphis this weekend for the funeral of one of my godmothers, right? Not a biological mother, but someone who's known me since I was 10, 11 years old. And so, drove the 8 hours from Chicago to Memphis to pay honor, to pay my respect. It's my godmother. Stopped by another godmother's house before I went to the other godmother's funeral to pay my respects. So, I think it's all about who creates for us and who do we identify? Who do we identify? Alice Walker says, name yourself, name your own community, name your own maternal figures who are there providing the love and the support. Because here's another piece, Bishop, a lot of us don't get along with Mama. A lot of us have been traumatized by Mama. And so for some of us, Mama is a trigger. And so what are ways then that we find other persons who can then provide that maternal, that love that we need and support that we need?
Thank you. Bishop, did you want to add something or good? All right. We have a question from our friend, Quincy James Reinhardt. He says, what role does womanist maternal thought play in the formation of LGBTQI persons?
Well, I think we were just talking about that. I think, I think in the last of my book, I said, where do we go from here? Then yes, how do we talk about images, and how do we talk about spaces, and how do we talk about places where it's already happening, but the literature is not showing that it's existing and that it's happening? So I think we need to have those conversations. I don't have a right to speak because how I identify, but Womanist says that if I'm committed to the survival of the entire community, then hey, let's talk about it. Let's write about it. Let's go on shows like this, podcasts like this, presentations like this, and talk about it. Absolutely. So I think there's a way in which womanist maternal thought says, again, we're not talking about biology, but we're talking about community. We're talking about spiritual connections. We're talking about self-naming and self-identifying. We're talking about ways in which we create our own sense of family and motherhood and mama and nana and grandmama there. Absolutely.
Bishop Flunder, you want to add something to that piece?
That was an amen finger that went up. I think. So that's right. That's right. The nurturer shows up in communities where it is not biologically female. The nurturer shows up. I know a lot of men who don't identify as gay, but embraced that in terms of how to be a nurturer. Not even that, the embrace is not even a good enough word. What they did was and do is slough off the idea that somehow feminizes them because they are nurturers. Just like it is in creation that there are some animals who hunt who are female and the male stays back. I've seen it in indigenous tribes, in experiences that I've had all over the world, where in some tribes, the men make the fabric, the women build the houses, if you understand what I'm saying. I think there's stereotypical things that have been attached in some ways in terms of gender that do not permit us to name nurturing as something that is without gender. It can show up in many ways, even if it seems not to be the assignment. And there are some women who try to be nurturers that really do need to do something else. I've seen them try to do that. Have you all ever seen anybody try to do that? Try to act like this, it's like, and it don't deal with the old wives' tales. They gathered all around me when I was pregnant, Dr. Crowder, and told me what to do. They told me to stay in the house for at least 3 weeks, because if I didn't stay in the house, I'd catch a cold in my caditsi. I didn't even know what my caditsi was. So I think this took me a long time to connect the dots, find out what my caditsi. And I said, well, when I found out, I said, well, I surely wouldn't want to get a cold in my caditsi. But I think that the heart and soul of it is there are some things that we have embraced because of the binary, and that to some degree we do need to expand for the sake of some of our brothers and because of some of the people that are part of the LGBTQI community. There's a broader understanding to come about what nurturing can really look like in many, many ways. I'd love to see that be book 2. Let's talk about that way. So
thank you, Bishop Flunder. Dr. Crowder, your last chapter in your book says, where do we go from here? Before you hit that, Pastor Anthony Sullivan, who helps us in this chat to move questions around and answer people, he says, what does or how does womanist maternal thought intersect with issues of health equity, particularly when Black women are vastly impacted by social determinants of health?
So but Black maternal deaths, what's the story that I think Serena Williams talking about if Serena Williams had to fight?
Yes.
Huh?
He talks about the fact that she was pregnant.
Right.
She was not getting the proper care. She kept saying what it was that she felt in her body. They still would not treat her, and she had to find someone else.
Right. So she got more money, and access to what kinds of doctors? So then imagine then the mother who's having to clock in, count hours, tally, while also trying to pay for childcare, right? And goes into labor, and so yeah, it's an inequity around how do we think about what the percentages, and that for if if it is that we are 3 to 4 times more likely to die giving child in childbirth than white women? Absolutely. COVID has unpeeled and says, and pull the curtains back, the sheets, has flipped, the car over and says, look at here, as it relates to equity in health among Black folk and among brown people as well. Think also about the taxation of motherhood of Black mothers in COVID, that how many mothers, said, I can't afford childcare, but yet at the same time, I have to be home. And yeah, here's baby boy, baby girl on the Zoom with me because I'm having to navigate all of this. And so how many of us have opted out of the workplace, not because of luxury, but because of economic impact? So absolutely, not just only health inequities, but economic inequities and the taxation that COVID is showing related to Black motherhoods and Black motherhood and the challenges absolutely that we're facing.
Thank you. I see you, Dr. Wanda Lundy. Thank you for being here tonight. Bishop-elect Sonia Williams this is the last question I'm going to ask you before you tell us where do we go from here. How do you embrace and understand Mother God? How does it play out in your theology?
Ooh, I think was it Bishop Flunder was just talking about language. It's language. And so how do we see, and she said the mighty breasted God, it's the El Shaddai, El Shaddai. We love to go through the L's, but that El Shaddai, El Roy, he'll be El Rapha, and we love that. But that El Shaddai, that's the mighty breasted God. That's the God of the nurturing. You go over, was it Deuteronomy 32, the eagle that's stirring the nest? That's maternal language. Psalm 31 says what? I have calmed and quieted myself like what? Like a mother, like a child that is leaning and weaning on, the mother. Isaiah says, how can I forsake? How can a mother forsake? It's her children. That's Isaiah. That's the prophet talking. Hosea, hello. All through Hosea, God as mother, God as maternal. Come through Luke 15. The woman that's looking for the coin, that's the metaphor of the holy, of the divine. So yes, we've got to say, well, wait a minute. Despite all of its patriarchal, patrilineal challenges, there's some maternal language in the Bible, in the King James Version. I use the NRSV. But so yes, that we've got to absolutely, how does our theology and our linguistics have a conversation and a dialogue? Because that then becomes the point of who, she talked about this ceiling, who can do what and who can't do what. Language becomes very significant in their regard. Absolutely. Is Phoebe in Romans 15, is Phoebe a servant or is Phoebe really a benefactor? So I'm just saying, yes, language shapes, forms, creates. Language gives rise to who can and who cannot. Absolutely. This feminist language of this mothering language of God is very significant. And it's in the biblical text.
I'll say Dr. Will is taking us down that road in the truest sense of the word.
Yes, in her lectionary.
Yes, indeed. Changing the whole dynamic. Mm-hmm. The whole dynamic. Thank you so much for that.
Dr. Crowder, the last thing, where do we go from here? That's your last chapter.
So I admit it. I think part of being intellectually honest is saying, this is what I didn't address. And we've hit on some of that, how do we have conversations around LGBTQIA plus and maternal ideas and womanist maternal thought? How do we have conversations around, for me, this was talking about the biblical text. Wonder what the Quran has to say about motherhood. Wonder what do we get in the, Bhagavad Gita? What does Hinduism have to say? So what are interreligious approaches to motherhood? I was talking to someone yesterday and talking about all this cannabis money that a lot of these states have. So how many mothers are benefiting from that? How do we even, in our seminaries and divinity schools, can we have a conversation about theology and cannabis
Yes, Lord.
now that it's legal in so many places? And that
Yes.
there's so many government programs that have money that said, you know, that are, again, have these programs and millions of dollars. Why? Because of cannabis. So where are religious institutions talking about that? And what are ways in which Black women, what are ways in which Black mothers can benefit from some of this? So that's why I'm trying to dare to go. Yeah.
And get their sons and daughters' records expunged.
Yes.
Because if it was illegal, 6 months before it was legal, and then they can do the very same thing that they did. We did that in California when we got it legalized here. We insisted that records be expunged. That was a part of the yes, if you understand what I mean. And I think that that's another part of it, and what that would do for the hearts of mothers.
Absolutely.
To
Absolutely.
help them to move forward, Yes. You're wonderful, sister. We love you.
Bless you.
I want to make one point.
Yes, please, Bishop Pearson.
Before we close, I was thinking during the conversation that none of in human history, we have not heard of very many, if any, females, mothers, women, queens who are autocratic, hateful, crimes against humanity, mass torturing of human beings. It's always been men. We've always heard about the angry woman. I don't know that the women are angry in my life. They're disgusted. And I've heard that term. All the women that I've been around that got anything done, there was no hostility in them. They were just disgusted. Men are hostile, and we do horrible things to other human beings or sponsor it. But the female nurturing, and I now say Father, Son, Holy Mother, the paraclitoris, to give the female, the whole Trinity excludes the female. That right there sends a signal across the planet that women don't have the role in the running of the company. And we need to change that language, because if you have the Father and the Son, you couldn't have both of them without the female or the mother. That doesn't mean, and Bishop Flunder is married to a woman, but she has a daughter. So just because you have the capacity to birth a child doesn't mean you can't love another woman, or men loving another man. That's a whole other subject. But it's theological, and it could create drama. But I think the Holy Spirit is the breast and breath of the church. And we need to re-emphasize that role, because when it comes to the nurturing, my mother was disgusted because of how male leadership was awkward and clumsy and sloppy. They didn't give attention to detail. The women would come in and fill the gaps, found the churches as Bishop Flunder's grandmother did. My mother and my grandmothers, they were all active women, but they were always disgusted. But I never saw anger, and that's hitting me tonight. I saw anger in the man. Angry at the woman, angry with the woman. We heard all our life. Them crazy women, that crazy wife, I'm crazy. That's just common for centuries. That needs to be corrected and stopped, identified and stopped. I'll never use the term that crazy mother of yours, that crazy woman. Well, I don't understand that crazy woman, because that has stuck, and it's becoming untangled right now more than any other time in human history. All these books on womanism, we're having to stop and inspect, and respect the woman, the man with the womb, and the wounded man. And I want to say, again, an open apology as a man and as a male to the females of the planet, the women, my own mother, my wife, my sisters, my daughter, that we've been arrogant, and we've been ignorant, and we've been insensitive, and we've been cold and cocky and egoic, to the point that we have caused generations of disgust. It's going to stop now. I feel it coming to a screeching halt. Women are rising to a different level, and there's a huge respect and reverence out there that's replacing our fear. That's positive.
Thank you, Bishop Pearson. Such a powerful ending statement. Bishop Flunder, would you have an ending statement? Dr. Crowder, would you have a last statement?
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. It's been a wonderful conversation. Very grateful. want to shout out to Chicago Theological Seminary and thank Bishop Flunder for being a co-laborer with Chicago Theological Seminary. There's a technician, I'm sorry, I forget her name, who's a student at Chicago Theological Seminary. Pastor Sue, thank you so much. And our interim president, our interim womanist president, Reverend Dr. Marsha Foster Boyd, and just say thank you all. And, when Mama speaks, it is, like a balcony from heaven. It is like, the rushing of mighty winds. When Mama speaks, it is that gentle, calming voice. When Mama speaks, it is when the sacred self and society come together. So thank you for this opportunity. It's been great.
Saints, get the book. Okay, go to Amazon and purchase the book. It's a powerful reading by a powerful woman of God who has put it together. You all can use this book for several different things, but certainly, for teaching, Bible study, for women's groups, for men's groups. Hello. When Mama Speaks, the Bible and Motherhood from a Womanist Perspective. The author is Stephanie Buchanan Crowder. Thank you so much, Dr. Stephanie. We appreciate you very much. Those of you that are still here with us, I know you want to win this book, so don't leave. Put hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers there. Hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers, all one word. We want you to make sure you do that now. We're going to get ready to do that drawing. And before we do that, we're going to go to commercials or to advertisement. We have several advertisements here for you tonight. And so let's get started, Pastor Sue. Bishop Flunder.
God bless you, our friends and family all over the United States and world. Beyond the Gatekeepers, we're encouraging you to continue to support this broadcast. If you haven't before now, then make it an important commitment. If you've been helped and blessed, support the broadcast by sending a donation. Send it via Cash App to $ Cash App, you see it? Send it to $TFAM Annual or to PayPal at www.paypal.me/TFAM Justice. Make a donation, make it tonight so that we can continue to do what it is that God has called us to do and continue to enlarge and increase our reach. God bless you is our prayer.
Tonight, save the date, July 12th through the 16th, 2022. Bishop Yvette Flunder, who is the presiding prelate of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, we will all be in Arizona at the Arizona Biltmore Resort. Our theme is Have We Got Good Religion? It is our TFAM Leadership Conference 2022. We have registration, early registration ends May 1st, $100. Regular registration ends July 1st, $125. On-site registration is $150. The room rate at the Biltmore is $119 per night. You can go to www.radicallyinclusive.org and you will find information there about the conference. There are some, you can also go to www.tfamconference2022. You can download our app. Just TFAM is the app. You can download the app. The information is there. Information is everywhere. It's on Bishop Flunder's Facebook page. It's on my Facebook page. It's on TFAM's web Facebook page. Pretty much everybody in the fellowship is advertising it. Come and go with us to Phoenix, Arizona in July.
Hello everyone, this is Jess Dominic, owner of Bulletin Flight Radio, your story, our station, a proud supporter of progressive Christians from around the world. So please join us every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. until 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for the best in gospel house, gospel indie, and inspirational word. And if you're looking to submit your music or sermons, please send us an MP3 and artist pick to bulletinflightpros@gmail.com. All submissions are free. Thank you for tuning in, and God bless.
You'll also find that Beyond the Gatekeepers is on Bullet in Flight Radio. You can look us up. We're there on Thursday nights. There's a playback from whatever we've done on tonight. So Thursday nights, we are on Bullet in Flight Radio. If you want to donate to your church, please look up Lifestyle Global Properties. Antonio Mattier, he's the lifestyle realtor, and he says, give to your church while accomplishing your goal of home ownership. Lifestyle Global Properties will donate 10% of the commission earned from your real estate transaction to your choice of City of Refuge or the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries in your name when you utilize their brokerage to purchase or sell a property, residential or commercial, in California or Georgia. Please look up Lifestyle Properties. Antonio Mattier is the proprietor and realtor. TNT Tuesdays, Tuesday night talks, RIM Fellowship United Church of Christ. Join them in their RIM virtual experience. Go to their website at www.rimatlanta.org. They invite you every Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for everyday, real, relevant, Bible-led conversations. Their pastor is Bishop-elect Sonia E. Williams. You can find them on Facebook Live. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on YouTube. And you can find them on Zoom. RIM Fellowship United Church of Christ. The Healing Place Apothecary, where Nubian Flunder, she is the daughter of our presiding bishop, is the founder. Please go to www.thp, which stands for the Healing Place Apothecary.com. That's www.thpapothecary.com. You will find several skin products there for your purchase. Please support. If you'd like to find out about t-shirts and mugs and everything, Sky Michelle's Tees and Things has it all for you, where the kid is the boss. You can go to www.skymichelle.com. You can follow her at I Am Sky Michelle on Facebook and Instagram. She has a new collection of t-shirts out with rhinestones. She has Dope Black collection, Faith collection, YA Flunder quotes, Kara motivational quotes. And if you need something customized, she can do it there too. Please support this young Black business. Kara Solutions, focus on your passion. Let Kara handle the rest. The founder is Susan A. Webley. She does remote production and video conferencing along with tech support. She does custom branding, show development, training. You can go to www.kara-solutions.com. If you need a free consultation, please email her at sue@kara-solutions.com for a free consultation. If you want to advertise with Beyond the Gatekeepers, please email us at beyondthegatekeepersshow@gmail.com. That's beyondthegatekeepersshow@gmail.com. Thank you for your support tonight. We appreciate it. We will see you all next week. Before we leave, we want to give away that book. Here we go. And the winner is Jermaine Drakefoot. Jermaine, I hope that you're still on. If you are, please inbox us on the Beyond the Gatekeepers page. Make sure that you put your name first and last, your address, city, state, and zip code so that we can get your book to you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining Beyond the Gatekeepers tonight. We love you. God bless you. Have a great night.
Very much.